So, William, do you remember Super Mario 64?
No.
No? What are you here for then?
You gotta show me it.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Hang on a second.
A few moments later.
All right, William. Now that you've seen a video, you've been reconnected with the game. Do you remember Mario 64?
Yes.
What was your favorite part of that game?
Bowser!
Bowser? What did you like about Bowser?
Where you have to, spin him around and try to throw him off the thing.
Okay, cool. Do you remember what your favorite level was?
Ice.
Oh, the ice level. Is that the one where you slide around?
Yeah.
Is that the one with the penguin?
Yeah. Goo gaga.
What? What was that noise?
Baby penguin.
Oh, that was the sound of a baby penguin? Okay.
I was doing goo goo gaga.
Nice. Do you remember the first part of the game where you just run around like a crazy person?
Yes.
How fun was that?
So fun.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to tell us about Mario 64?
Yes. There's these gray things that roll around and try to flatten you up, and then you're dead.
What gray things?
Those balls, those metal balls that flatten you up.
Oh, the metal balls that go down the mountain?
Yeah.
Oh, that is pretty memorable. Anything else?
Princess Peach and Bowser and Mario.
Those are the three main people in the game. Yes, Princess Peach, Mario, and Bowser. All right, well, thank you, William. It seems like you know quite a bit about Mario 64. More than I figured you'd remember, considering you were 3.
I'm just very good at it.
What are you very good at?
Video games!
Yeah, well. William, thank you for being on the show. And to everyone listening at home, enjoy the rest of our Mario 64 episode.
Bye!
It's me, Mario. Hello.
How do you introduce a game that needs no introduction? I mean, literally none. If you listen to this podcast, you are a gamer person, and gamer people know all about Mario 64. And I really struggled with this for a week and change. What do I do? For me, I just took the advice of the New Dad Gaming Podcast team and asked my 5-year-old son to do it. I mean, why not him? I mean, he watched me play it a couple years ago. He was 3, and I gave him a unplugged controller and said, "Hey, you're playing a game now." And he loved it. He had a blast. Because we all know about the innovations, the gameplay, and that quantum leap Mario 64 was from the SNES to the N64. And it still remains one of the best games on the console. It set a high watermark that few have surpassed. So, let's get personal. On this episode of A Gamer Looks at 40, my guests and I share stories of our first encounters, use the opening area as a template for why the game works so beautifully, and then share some of our favorite moments. Let's jump through the pipe, barge into the castle, and explore the world of Super Mario 64 together. Starting us off in our journey through the world of Super Mario 64 is friend of the show, Andrew Craig. He shares how he received the game as a kid and his first impressions, and then my brother Bobby tells the story of how he was excited for Super Mario 64 and how he first experienced this classic game. Let's start with the N64. Did you have that as a kid? Was that something you experienced as an adult, or kind of where'd you land on that?
the N64 for me, I was the launch day kid.
Oh wow, okay.
I was that, like, I refuse to go to school unless I get this thing. I need it. Like that was the peak of my God, what year was that? That would have been like 94. So I was 12.
Wow.
And I was old enough at that point to know that I had enough autonomy that I could make life really difficult. And so it was I'll do this if I have to, but this is a thing I need.
Gotcha.
I had it like right away. Mario 64, right away, ready to go. Let's do this. And I played the crap out of that thing.
That's awesome. Can you think back now? Was that the first time you'd played Mario 64? Because I remember when I was a kid, I went to like your, I guess maybe not GameStop, maybe Electronics Boutique still at that time. But one of the video game stores, and they would be on a kiosk. I remember just putting the controller in my hand. What did you, can you think back and just kind of describe what you felt the first time Mario comes up out of the pipe and you're experiencing Mario in 3D space? Like, can you think back and like how you felt about that experience?
My first real memory of Mario in 3D was actually not in the game itself. I have this very vivid memory of waiting for an orthodontist appointment, sitting in my dad's truck on a rainy day in Southern California, which is pretty rare. And I had an issue of Game Pro magazine.
Right.
And they were doing their look at what Nintendo's got coming.
Oh, okay.
And I remember like trying to explain to my dad, like, no, these aren't pixels anymore. It's not these flat objects. It's suddenly a 3D rendered world that this is taking place in, which means polygons and shapes. And this is going to change everything.
Yeah.
You don't just run left to right, up and down. You can run back and forth now too. And that opens up the possibility. And so when Mario 64 came out, when he first jumped out of that pipe, it was like this revelatory moment of it felt the same way that it did to a certain extent going from the Intellivision, which was my first console,
right,
to the Nintendo, where it's like technology has now allowed the possibility for something so much bigger, so much grander, and so much greater.
Yeah. I definitely want to then talk about the N64.
Yes,
yes. And the glory. So I think, again, that was another one of our shared gifts that we received as kids. Of course, it came with Mario 64. What was your first impressions playing Mario 64, if you can remember back?
I remember it like it was yesterday.
Okay.
Well, because like that was like roughly 98, I guess, or
96.
96, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Because like Super Nintendo was your big exciting system, and I think Nintendo 64 might have been mine. I know we shared it; it was a shared gift.
Yeah.
We shared lots of things, but I was super excited for Nintendo 64. It was pumped up a lot. Nintendo Power. They would show like screenshots of like what it could be. I think it was called something else before N64, like Project Dolphin.
No, Dolphin was the GameCube, if I'm not mistaken.
Darn it.
It was called Ultra 64.
It was
for
Ultra.
the longest time.
Yes.
It was the Ultra 64.
I remember those very distinctly being called Ultra 64. And so when we got one, I couldn't believe. I didn't even ask for one, I don't think. I don't even remember like really asking for one. It wasn't a thought. Playing Mario in that 3D world was just it was just jaw-dropping. And just the way to jump over things, to do the power jump, it's just so crazy to like, because before Mario was this 2D, left to right, but now I'm wandering around the castle. The castle is oddly like quiet and kind of creepy in parts. And all the weird art design, they really stretch what they can do with that N64 graphics. Like there's checkered floors and stuff. Like it's kind of a weird eyesore. I don't know why would anyone live in this castle, but
I think everything in that game was tuned to help you figure out how to navigate it.
It's so well designed.
It's my favorite. It's one of my favorite ones in Mario.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up there with Mario World and original Mario Brothers, Mario
and
3.
just the fun of finding secrets, of course, finding hidden walls, finding all kinds of stuff. trying to drain the lake so you can get down that hole, which is a whole
That's
other
right.
world.
Yep.
All
Yep.
that stuff. It's such a fun, rewarding experience.
Next up, Greg Sewart of the Player One Podcast, Generation 16 YouTube series, and EGM alumnus, talks about his experiences with Mario 64. And then Julian from Nerds Without Pants continues the sugar speaking about Mario's first 3D adventure. Mario 64, I mean, I might just do an episode on Mario 64 because obviously of all the N64 games, it's amazing that the probably the most important and most beloved was the first one. Mm-hmm. Which is really interesting. You know, obviously Super Nintendo, things evolve, but I almost feel like Mario 64, I don't say it never got better than that on the system, but almost feels that way, at least when it comes to the big tentpole games. I mean, I don't think you can overstate how important Mario 64 was. I mean, it introduced a generation of kids to what an analog stick does.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I think you can make an argument for it. You can be really flip and just say it too, right? Like Mario 64 was the best and nothing came close. There were other great games on there, but
Yes.
I mean, it's impressive to say by the end of that system's life, the very first game that was released on it probably still sits in the top 5.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If not number 1. And you can't say that with a whole lot of video game systems over the years. Like you look at the NES, and of course, well, I mean, in North America, the NES, one of the first games, Super Mario Brothers, sure, very good game. But, by the end of that system's life, the catalog was so amazing that it's
Right.
probably not even top 10. Same with like Altered Beast on the Genesis.
Sure.
And, or Keith Courage on the TurboGrafx. Like just, it came out and set the bar so high. I actually think it might have actually done a disservice to the system in a way,
Maybe
for third parties, where you had such a high bar to aim for, and very rarely did anyone touch it.
Yeah, I mean, games came close. And like you said, there were excellent games on that system. There's no question. But Mario 64 is one of those that continues to just endure, and for good reason. It's a beautifully designed game. I mean,
still fun to play.
It's still fun to play. I played through it with my kiddo maybe last year, and he's still too young. He was just, I gave him an unplugged controller, and he was like, "Oh, this is fun." It's fine. Like, you're helping, but it's still it's not perfect. Obviously, there are some areas where the camera angles are super jank, and it's not perfect, but it's still really fun to just run around the map. I want to kind of go into that moment a little bit. That first time you picked up the controller at a kiosk. Where was it? Is it Toys R Us?
It was Toys R Us, yes.
Right. So Toys R Us, I'm assuming like after school or on a weekend, you get up to that station, you look at the screen, you probably waited in a bit of a line, I'm assuming.
I'm
sure.
Definitely
right?
did, yeah.
Yeah. So you get up there, anticipation, get your hands on a controller, Mario, an open 3D space in the field, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Can you recall what went through your mind as you started navigating that 3D space?
It was pure joy. Yeah. From moment one, it just felt so right. I didn't hesitate for a moment. Like, it just clicked. Which is weird to say because, it was the first time that video games had an analog stick. Up until that point, like a perfect example is Tomb Raider, right? Like controlling Lara Croft in that first game, you have to like turn her manually. Like, it's not quite tank controls like Resident Evil, but it's pretty much tank controls.
It was pretty grid based too, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then just Mario just like running around and zipping around and back flipping and forward flipping and triple jumping and, doing the belly dive after like a triple jump, like just everything just felt so good.
Keeping the hype train a rolling, Trevor and Jeff from New Dad Gaming talk about their first time playing in 3D space, and then Raji, also known as Super Nintendbros on Twitch, shares a unique experience with this groundbreaking title. Actually, so N64, you guys both had it, obviously. What was some of your formative games for that? I mean, I'm sure you both played Mario 64. That was kind of what everyone did, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Yeah. What was your experience like? Do you remember the first time? And then I guess Jeff, probably you as more of a kid, and there's Trevor too. When you first played Mario 64, like what was that experience for you playing Mario in 3D space for the first time?
I'm pretty sure my mind was melting. Like I remember my kid brain just blown away at how they captured the feeling of Mario. Like he was 3D and I could do all this stuff, and it was actually very difficult. I remember running in, you know, when you kind of come out of the pipe in the intro area, you have castles in front of you and everything. I remember running around there probably for a couple hours, just trying to get all the moves down, because I'm like, this is so amazing. I could do all these things. I can go in water. This is like I can try and dive down. This is amazing. And I was just like taken back by all the mechanics that were there, and not to mention trying to get used to the controller itself, right? Because that was such a difference.
A hot mess.
How do I work this? The controller's in the center. Like I don't. I remember it would be, instead of like directing Mario, I'd always direct the camera, because that was where, you know, the directional buttons were, but they were the C buttons, and that was the camera control. So I would always like have Lakitu, I think he was the camera guy, just spin around, and I was like, okay, this is gonna take me a while. I need to like just process this. But I remember just being blown away and opening the doors to the castle and having everything sprawl out and all the paintings going in to the different worlds. It was just bananas. I couldn't even put into words what I was feeling, but it was like that, almost like that brand new feeling that I don't quite get anymore, which is kind of, I don't know, not to be a downer, but like it's just like diminishing returns, right? Like that just blew me away, and I don't find I get that anymore, or like trying to capture that magic is a little bit more difficult. So yeah, it was a big time for me.
So with that Nintendo 64, you got Super Mario 64 or Mario 64.
Yep.
Do you remember how you felt the first time you set up the system, plugged it into the TV, popped in Mario 64, and then boom, you turn it on? Do you remember how you felt at that moment?
From what I can recall, it was just that new game, new experience, Mario, Nintendo. It's kind of a euphoria. It's like, like, I don't know how you feel, but when a new game comes out, or a fresh experience, like something that you like, I grew up with the NES, the Super NES. I know what Mario is. I grew up with it, played a lot of it. But then getting to that point, popping it on for the first time, hearing that first jingle, dun, 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 in that first open world where you can walk around, that was insane. It was just a feeling of, I don't know, overwhelming happiness, joy, euphoria, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
You just don't, it's cool to not know what it is, and it's cool to explore. And that's something that is, I guess, you know what? A big theme of why I love gaming, and why I probably originally fell in love. And that goes back to The Legend of Zelda on the NES. One of the first games I ever played like that just grabbed me, because you can go where you want, you can explore, you can find secrets, you can get killed. It was such a cool experience,
Do you need 3 people to follow on social media, befriend in real life, and shower with all manner of treasure, trinkets, and jewels? Maybe not the last part, but do at least the first one, and follow my awesome patrons: Pete Harney, known as CypherX0 on Twitter, the co-host of Gamers Week podcast, Gamers Week PC on Twitter, Ryan Payne, and Dan of RetroLogic Podcast at RetroLogic Games, also on Twitter. You too can join these pillars of society for a merely $2 by visiting my Patreon, patreon.com/agamerlooksat40. So here's where this episode gets a little weird, a little strange. Not strange, just unexpected. Somehow, someway, most of my interviews turn toward the topic of the opening courtyard. That moment when you pop out of a pipe and are given the freedom to just play. Maybe it was first impressions, maybe it was the shock of just navigating a 3D world for the first time, but so many people gravitated to Mario 64's 1-1. So let's talk about it at length with a bunch of people. We start with the fellas from New Dad Gaming, followed by my brother Bobby, and then finally Andrew Craig.
The jump it represents is really hard to comprehend how they pulled it off. Because if you really do think about their previous console, so they come from SNES, like 2D space, super flat, kind of very much old arcade thinking as far as gaming, right? Okay,
Sure.
you have 6 quarters, so you get 6 lives, 1 continue, super locked down, and then you're thrown into this 3D space. But more than the 3D space is just the openness of it. Like in some ways, you can almost call that like an open world. There's the hub level. It's like, hey, welcome, you're here. It's like, well, what's the time limit? What do I have to do? Oh, you'll find it. There's paintings, but just play around. You're fine. Whatever. And you're like, what? and it's like, well, what happens if I go to this tree? Oh, I'm climbing the tree. What is that? What happens if I go into the water? I'm swimming now? Like, your guy just had total control over his own body in that space. So you're thrust into a world where normally it is nothing but constraints and time limits and immediate requirements of you, put into an entirely 3D space, which looks at the time, and still to this day, really fantastic. Yeah. And the entire world is, you have agency over. You can climb that tree, you can jump over that rock, you can backflip. If you jump from too high, you die. Like, just all of these physical notions that suddenly showed up in a space that we were entirely unused to. Like, which, I don't know, to Jeff's point, I just don't know that, besides maybe virtual reality, the first time you get into like a really interesting game, it's kind of hard to imagine we'd ever have that kind of quantum leap forward in gaming. And that's kind of what that represented, I think.
I think that's interesting. I think Mario 64, its biggest success is that it had to introduce an entire generation of gamers on how to use a thumbstick.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't exist on consoles before the N64. PlayStation, if you remember, was still D-pad.
Yeah.
Until the N64 came out, and then they came out with one that you could select analog or not.
DualShock.
DualShock, yes.
Yes.
And so that was like you had to introduce that, which is why that opening level of Mario 64 is so open and quiet.
Yeah.
No enemies, just run around and play.
Just try to run around
figure
and
it out.
play and figure it
and
out.
And of course you did, because the first thing anybody did when they came out of that pipe was run in circles.
Yeah.
I can run in circles. This is amazing.
Perfect circles. Yeah.
You can run in perfect circles. And again, that's the game being intentional. I think everything in that game is so intentionally designed. The castle, right? You have these very bright blocks, very bright, colorful, or the checkered floor. Intention to, so you stand out against it, right? So you can get a gauge of space, and you can... Oh, I mean, and it's not perfect. Like, some of the camera angles are just rough. You're doomed by camera angles all the time.
I wanted to bring this up.
Yeah.
Also, for the first time, and I don't care how seasoned of a gamer you were in that moment, you've never had to control the camera. That was also a separate set of controls on the C-pad.
That's right.
And I remember that being like, that's actually part of the gameplay where you would jump on platforms. I can't see him. I got to move the camera. I never thought about the camera in any game. I'm just looking at the game. I never thought about the camera as even like a physical entity. It's just your vision. But in N64, for the first time, you actually be aware, like, because of 3D space, you're actually aware of like the point of view.
I still maintain the opening area of Mario 64 is one of the greatest like 1-1s. I mean, top 3 in the Mario series. I know it's a bold claim, but I just adore that whole open section where you can just play, go around. I love it.
That's sort of the beauty of the way that that Mario specifically was designed, because you look at the original Super Mario Brothers. When you first start that game, you're on a screen by yourself.
Right.
So you can move left and right, and nothing disturbs you from doing that. And then you go right a little bit more, and suddenly there's a Goomba. And if you run into it, you die. And if you jump, you don't. And so it's subconsciously teaching you how to play the game. without having to give you any text on screen saying, you need to jump to avoid this. It's a tutorial without being a tutorial.
I love it. It's so
Teaching you
elegant.
without holding your hand. And Mario 64 works much the same way, where that whole opening area is spaces that allow you to learn how to use this character. You know, if you want to jump, there's water right there, so you can jump in the water and experience what swimming is like before getting into a level where you are required to swim.
Yep.
There's walls close to each other, so you can go over there and play around and hopefully figure out the wall jump before you need to use the wall jump for anything. It's that whole playground is set up to give you the time and freedom to learn the mechanics before the mechanics become necessary.
And I love the fact how it's so friction free. There's no friction. There's not even like music. It's just the sound of birds chirping and this really pleasant, sunny environment. And if you think about it, you know, like to your point, Mario Brothers had to teach a generation of gamers who may not have ever had a D-pad in their hand, you know, how to move left and right and jump and etc. This is now teaching a generation of gamers who had never used a thumbstick, never seen one before, how to actually navigate Mario in a beautiful open space. And I just so elegant and wonderful that you could spend hours. And I think I probably did. I probably spent hours. And I also like the fact that it forces you to learn it before you can move on, because to your point, if you jump in the water and flounder around, it's just going to let you figure it out, right? The game's not going to say hit A to swim. You know, there are tool tips throughout the game when you're required to learn something, like when you're required to do a long jump, there's a little sign that says how to do the long jump. But at that moment, it's just let you figure it out or reset the game and don't go in the water. But I mean,
and not punish you for it.
Exactly. No friction, no punishment, just figure it out and learn it. And as anybody who's done any teaching or any instructing, I'm a trainer by trade. That's the best way to teach somebody, is to let them figure it out. You know, assume they can figure it out on their own using their own. You guide them, right? But assume they're going to figure it out on their own if they have to, right? So, God, I just love that opening part of Mario 64.
Yeah, well, and it prepped us for everything that follows, because if not for the training that we got with Super Mario 64, the idea of jumping into something like Ocarina of Time would have just been impossible and overwhelming.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Jumping into something like Goldeneye would have been impossible and overwhelming. But because we sort of started with such a slight learning curve with Mario 64 in that opening area especially, we became comfortable with the tool set. And so when they threw a new challenge at us with another game, or even in Mario 64, we were able to adapt to it because we didn't learn in a really rigid way.
The amazing Andy from CafeBTW podcast and Twitch stream shares his thoughts on Mario's 1-1, and then Blue Williams from the Gamers Week podcast shares a differing opinion. If you listen to the N64 episode, you know what to expect. But that's a good thing. These are good things. Differing opinions are good and healthy and help us grow as people. Embrace them, even though you don't 100% agree. Let's listen in. What was your experience with that, playing Mario 64?
So I think it was the first time I got to see the face that you see on the title screen that you can manipulate with the controller. And the reason I bring that up is because I think it was like a clever way for you to kind of get used to like the analog stick right off the bat. And then, dude, when I first jumped in, and I just was able to like spin in a circle and see the landscape, even though it wasn't to this graphics, quality of today. Back then, it just blew me away, and I think it was just being able to be free. I felt free, Yeah. So I think that was the feeling, just the freedom of roaming around and making your own decisions to where you want to move in the game.
Big breakthrough, and the analog stick was absolutely just a phenomenal addition to that controller and that system in general.
Yeah, people forget how influential the N64 was. I mean, just introducing. 'Cause I don't know which came first, the DualShock on the PlayStation or the N64, but man, just utilizing that to navigate that 3D space and doing so well. I mean, I have a hard time finding another game in that era that utilized that as well as Mario 64, which was the first. And I felt like nobody else could really quite get that, say your Donkey Kong 64, Banjo-Kazooie, etc. But man, that opening, and I like the way you said about that opening face, where you can stretch out the Mario face.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the game is saying, you need to figure out what this stick does before you even start.
Yeah.
So you better play around here. Here's a fun thing to do. I just knew what it was doing. And, later on those levels, I remember I actually replayed it recently. And some of those later levels, the camera angles get in your way, and
Sure.
there's some jank, but man, it's still a great experience.
Yeah, I'll never forget just the feeling of playing it. And just to add to the story, Toys R Us at the time, that was one of the first consoles they started to think, let's have a pre-order for it. So Toys R Us actually offered a pre-order for the first time. And don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure for me, it was the first system I ever pre-ordered. Dude, I pre-ordered it I think they let you pre-order almost a year ahead. And the receipt sat under my TV for as long as that was. And it felt like an eternity. The day I could lift that receipt from under my TV and give it to my mom was the greatest feeling. So
that's great. Get me this system. It's here. First thing. Oh.
When I play that game, the thing that strikes me, especially about the opening area, is how empty it is, how empty it feels. You walk in and you feel like it's deserted.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's empty on purpose because the developers want to give you this beautiful open space to just play and have no risk, just learn the controls. Because most people, when they got an N64, that was the first game they played.
Mm-hmm.
What is this dopey thumbstick in the middle of this controller that's completely out of place? What is this?
Right.
And once you start playing with it, you start learning it, of course. And that open arena, which has stuff in it, you have trees to jump on, you have the river, the moat to swim through.
Right, but you're all alone.
Which is great because there's no friction. It's great.
That's fair because, Mario games, they always have a bit of a tutorial section at the beginning. Not like an explicit one, but an area that naturally teaches you how to play. And maybe that was their way of teaching you how to navigate 3D.
Yeah.
But for me, usually when you get in a Mario game, you walk 3 feet and you start running into enemies.
True. Very true. Yes.
So this one is just where is everybody? It's a desolate landscape.
Well, you hear birds. There's some birds twerping and tweeting.
Twerking, whatever.
Gosh. I guess that's a difference of opinion then, because for me, I love the fact that it is so empty. And again, there's no hit, right button to do this and use the stick to do this. I don't think. It just lets you play with it. And it's also saying, in order for you to progress, you need to have mastered navigating 3D space in order to progress. Because the game is understanding most of y'all have never played a game like this. So we have to make sure you've mastered the absolute basics before we let you in the castle. Because if there were enemies running around that open courtyard, that'd be frustration.
Yeah,
you'd be running into enemies like a crazy person.
And that's
the first
fair.
Thing
I don't know how else I personally would have done it.
Yeah.
I just know that when I played it, that was my impression. Is this feels so lonely.
Yeah, that's very fair. That's definitely a correct statement. I agree with that. Greg Sewart, followed by Julian, keep the opening level conversation rolling. And that opening level of Mario 64 is pure gold. It is one of my favorite 1-1s in the Mario series. It's probably top 3 for me, to be honest, because it gives you such that open playground.
Yeah, that was one of the things I think that game did so wonderfully, and it was new for the Mario series. the Mario games up until that point, definitely there were always secrets to find and things like that. But putting you in this rather compact but open world, and I mean, in pure Nintendo style, directing you to, here's the easiest and first thing you should do. But boy, if you take some time to look around and, oh, look, what are all these red coins? Okay, so that gets me star. And, there's this other little character over here that I have no idea who it is, but if I go help them, hey, wait, they're hiding a star too. There was so much to discover. And again, that classic Nintendo style where they would constantly nudge you forward. If you hadn't discovered things, you get a star, come back out, go back in. It's like, oh, there's a new star on the list. What is this?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it was amazing. It was just, I was blown away by it the first time I turned it on, couldn't put it down. And like I said, as soon as it was out in English, not that really made a difference.
Right, yeah.
I played through it again. And I can still, it's definitely one of those games that I could pick up every year or two. And maybe not play through it, but still absolutely love playing it.
Yeah, just tool around the first few levels and kind of experience it. I like the fact that you played it for the first time on an import console, and you didn't get any of the you didn't get any of the tutorializing because that game does not require it.
No,
at all.
No.
I mean, there's like little signs and such you can read, teach you how to do the long jump and etc. But you just learn it. It's so intuitive that it's amazing how intuitive that game is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it took what I still think is, I'm going to say it, one of the worst designed controllers for a game console and made it feel good.
It's one of the few games that actually feel good to play on that controller.
That spot feels very Miyamoto as far as like, that is very 1-1, where it's like, we're going to put you in a space where you are just by nature going to discover everything that you can do. I mean, that one does have some tutorial signs that you can look at if you want to, but you don't really need to. Like, it's one of those weird things, like I said again, like, even though it was a brand new type of control scheme and a brand new type of gameplay, it just worked like from moment one, and it just felt phenomenal.
A modern game would have had you come out the pipe, and then there would have been a big circle in the ground, dashes in it. It would say, use the control stick to go in a circle. And you'd walk into the circle, and you'd do it 3 times, and it'd go, ding, good job. Hit the A button to jump, and you'd jump 3 times, ding.
Yep.
But they are so brave and confident in their control scheme. Confident, this is going to work. People are going to get this. Kids are going to get this. They're going to get this.
I wish Nintendo still had that confidence, because one of the things that has really pushed me away from their games in modern day is the constant tutorialization.
We've talked movement, we've talked onboarding, and now it's time to talk about the nuts and bolts of the game itself. After the break, Andrew, the lads from New Dad Gaming, and Julian return to chat about their favorite levels and aspects of this timeless classic. All right, this is looking like a shorter show than normal, so guess what? Time to say 10 nice things about 10 nice people. Oh boy, I will try to get through this in the space of 3 minutes. It never happens, but here we go anyway. First off is Tech Lover BM91, a huge Sonic fan. Very happy he decided to give me a follow. He's a big fan of the new Sonic movie. So if you like Sonic, check him out as well. Next up, Bar Silence VGM. Bar Silence is a brand new video game music podcast that I really hope you check out. A fun format, lots of good tunes, and just a really great format for checking out video game music. Y'all, please do a Journey to Silliest episode. Please. I beg you. I did an episode. Y'all will do it better. Next up is Cadus Bane. Cadus Bane. Caedus Bane. Follow the show on the back of the video game retail episode with Julian and John. Really glad you enjoyed it. Thanks for the follow. And I hope I didn't butcher your Twitter handle too badly. JZPF Playing 2. He's a jazz pianist who rocks the occasional retro game music. Greatly appreciate you checking out the show. Big Lil Weasel. He's a creator who does nearly everything. It's insane. He's doing film festivals, podcasts, Twitch streams. I don't know. He's an astronaut. I really don't know what else the man could possibly do, but he's doing it all and doing it well. Interesting person. Check out his work. Meg, OOBUH, brand new to Twitter and the retro gaming community, but not to games. Oh no, she knows what she's talking about. Meg looks to be working on a YouTube channel in the near future, so if you want to get on the ground floor, give her a follow. It's always good to support new creators doing good work that they're proud of, and it helps, especially when you're starting out. So please check her out on Twitter and elsewhere. Emo-esque_IWL. This was one of those, like, how am I not following you situations that was quickly rectified when I found that out. Emo-esque is a member of the Gamers Week podcast community. He's a knowledgeable music fan and an all-around good egg. Worth a follow for sure. At Clayman, Kleyman. See everything I said about Emo-esque. Same story. A few days ago, we talked about giant donuts. It was great. And they are a thing. Size of your head donuts. There's 2 miles away. They sell giant donuts. It's an evil, evil siren's call. He's just a really cool dude and a really great follow on Twitter. Please do so. RGC Podcast is a games club style podcast where the hosts play through a couple of games and let the audience play along. I love this format. It's a great opportunity to play alongside somebody and have that conversation, whether or not it's with a friend or with a podcast host virtually. They're really neat. It's a really neat concept. So give them a try. And then finally, Holy Headshot. He's a father of 5, a paramedic doing the good work in the world, and he's a New York Rangers fan. Well, all right. Nobody's perfect. Let's be honest here. Nobody's perfect. But hey, I grew up a fan of the New Jersey Devils. I've been a Devils fan since I was 11. We are bred to despise each other, but I don't despise you, Holy Headshot. I love you for checking out the show and being a part of the program. And let's be honest. I mean, look, the Rangers are a really good team, and the Devils have been terrible for a decade. So, you won. I have no arguments anymore. Just my deep-seated East Coast bias keeps us apart. Thank you very much for the follow. If you want to be in this list at some point, then do likewise and follow me on Twitter at agamerlooks4040 on Twitter. Thanks to everyone who's supported the show. Back to the episode. Just to kind of camp on Mario 64 a little bit more, do you guys have any favorite levels that come to mind?
I do. Right. Again, right off the bat, it's the penguin level. Yeah. Not because you can screw with the penguin and throw him off. I'm not that person. But it's those snow levels. It's just something about snow levels to me that just, maybe it's my childhood of having that snow day. Didn't have to go to school, could be at home under a blanket and play video games. And that's what gives me that kind of, that feeling. So it's the snow level in Mario 64 with the penguin. I don't know what the world is called, but it's with the baby penguin and the mother penguin. And just the world itself. Again, you could throw the penguin off the cliff if you wanted to, but there's a slide down there. It's just a fun world, and I just like being in that space. So that's it.
Sliding in Mario 64 is an ultimate good. Like, it's just a pure joy if sliding. What do you think, Trevor?
I think like it comes fairly early. It may even be the first level, but what? Maybe one of you two can remember it. When is the first level you get the flying hat?
Oh, that's in the first the bomb world where you can climb up the mountain. You can race the turtle, and
Okay, because there's something. I think Jeff, mentioned the first couple hours being in the open space that you first get into. My first couple hours was definitely with that hat. Something about that character with that physicality in that 3D world, with the ability to just fly all over the place. Just like I can almost feel it now talking about it. How wonderful and mind-blowing that particular part was. So because of that, that's really whenever you say like Mario 64 level, like that's the one that immediately crystallizes for me.
With the sound effect, right? Like
that whooshing, that whooshing sound. Oh, the whooshing is great. That's a good point about the flying too, because I forgot about that. That is such a wonderful, because it felt like you're flying. Yeah, I love that initial bomb level because you can do almost everything you can do in like a combat situation, kind of sort of. You learn there. You can even jump on one of those the turtle shell and use it as a skateboard. You know, if you find that in that like far off area. Yeah, that's a good pick. I love the sliding though. I'm with you in the Nicole. That's one of my favorites. The cool penguin, whatever it's called.
Yes, love it.
Going back to Mario 64, have you played it recently?
I played it a little bit when the Switch remaster came out.
Right.
And then I dabbled with it a little bit. I ended up picking up an N64. Oh, I was going to say a couple years ago from a guy, but that was actually 12 years ago now.
Oh, okay.
Time is a construct. It's still real good to me. I definitely hear a lot more scuttlebutt of like, oh, you know what? Maybe it doesn't hold up all that well. I think it holds up just fine. I enjoy going back to old games, but I probably because I've lived through all of it. It's very easy for me to look at an old game in context. So
sure,
it's like, okay, yeah, like this camera isn't great, but at the time it was perfect, yo. So I would remember constantly criticizing games that came out after Mario 64 for their camera, saying like, but Mario already did it. Like, why can't you just do what Mario did?
Yeah.
Like I would say that out loud to like video games that I was playing. But yeah, but I think a big thing for me with video games is audio and like music and the combination of like sound effects and music. And so, we're talking about Mario 64 right now, and like the first level is totally in my head, and like the sound of like the cam, like the C buttons when you move the camera, and the Charles Martinet sound, like voice clips, and the sound of his footsteps as he like gets up to speed, like all of that stuff is just like very present in my brain.
What would you say your favorite, one of your favorite areas of Mario 64 would be? And I'm not sure how recently you've played it, so that may be a challenging one.
I went back and 120 started when the collection came out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
About a year ago.
Very cool. Very good.
I was always a big fan of the tower. But a big part of that was a lot of the technical stuff is easier to read on that tower.
Is that the one with like with the thwomp at the very top?
Yeah, with the thwomp at the very top.
Yeah.
That was the one that was easiest to read a lot of the technical stuff, like the fact that flowers were created by having two flat flowers, essentially positioned in a cross position. So no matter what side you were looking at, you saw the same flower. There was a little bit of water. There were enemies that could push and pull, and from a physics perspective, as a kid, I was looking at it going like, holy crap, these things all impact in different ways. And, we were so trained at that point that enemies killed you if they touched you. And I think that was the first level where I really saw the concept of an enemy can make contact with you without hurting you, because there are those enemies that like slide out and push you off the railing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's right, because you have the railings there. Yeah, no, that's cool, man.
So that was always a favorite, and then I always loved the Bowser levels just because those were always fantastic tests of everything you've learned. And if Nintendo's good at anything, it's saying, here's all the skills you've learned. Now we're going to remix them in an interesting way and give it to you as a new challenge.
Absolutely. I mean, Nintendo, I 100% agree. Nintendo makes impeccable levels usually. I mean, if for that exact reason, but I don't think they make very good bosses. I've had this conversation with other people who've disagreed. I don't think the bosses they create are terribly good, but I think the levels are that's the point. Like Mario 3, for example, the airships are great. Again, you're using everything you've learned. You're using everything you've learned to progress, and then get to this dumb Koopa kid you hit 3 times in your right. I never liked the way they make,
and they're carbon copies of each other.
Exactly, maybe slight differences. I think the bosses in Mario 64 are actually pretty good. I love the Thwomp Boss. I think that's a really good articulation of down stomping and avoiding, and I like that. But so I think that's really okay in Mario 64. I love Cool Mountain. That's always my favorite because sliding in Mario 64 is pure joy. It's just pure joy, and just love that.
It always drove me a little crazy because you don't have ultimate control over him.
That's a fair point. What do you mean? Do you feel like it's the game's kind of putting you on rails a little bit?
Well, no, it's anytime you have ice physics, it means that you can't stop exactly where you intended to stop, and you can't jump exactly the way you intended to jump, and that's the entire point of it.
True. That's the challenge.
And
that's a good point.
And because I'm the kind of person that I am, I like to maintain complete control. I like everything to go exactly the way I intended it to go. And with ice levels, both the fun and the difficulty for me is that I get frustrated with the fact that I don't have that control.
Yeah, I think for me, I agree with you to the most part for ice levels. I think I enjoy being able to kind of to work around the I do agree with you to a certain extent, because I like in ice levels having to work within the rules of the world as they've changed slightly. I don't love like water levels, for example, though. I don't love if they just take away a verb and not add one. I despise that. Just making me slower or less agile is terrible. But like in Mega Man, it works because even though I'm slower, I can jump higher. So you've added a verb, even though you've taken away. And I actually like that. That's cool. Actually, modern games do it worse, I think, than classic games personally, but that's a different story, I think.
Well, I think classic games had to be more creative mechanically.
Sure.
Than modern games do.
Sure. And in the modern games, if you're in the water, you're swimming and you're slow because they're aiming for realism. It's like, well, that's not fun. It's not terribly fun to restrict my movement like that and give me a timer, an artificial breath timer, which is real, right? You can't hold your breath forever, but it's not fun. And I think that's kind of where that trade-off comes. I always like Cool Mountain. I love the introductory level. The Bomb Bombs is just, there's so many fun diversions there. There's so many fun diversions in the original bomb level. I like the fact you can get everything. You can do a turtle shell, which allows you to kind of do that skateboarding mechanic. You have the Bomb Bombs, where you can shoot from the cannon. You have, it has nearly.
You got your first race in the game.
Yep. And it's a very lightweight race where it's hard to lose almost, you can do the race. The one level I don't love in that game is the tiny to big world, where like you can be tiny and then you're big. I never love that because I feel like you've taken away too much control and precision. I don't know. And I think I might be in a minority on that.
No, I love it conceptually, but in practice, there are so many points where you inch forward to cross this very thin path, and because your foot happens to land in the wrong spot, you go all the way down and then have to climb all the way back up.
Right.
It's a cool idea.
Yeah.
But I feel like there are a lot of issues with the way that it's executed.
And I think
that was the limitation of the hardware and all that.
Yeah, I was going to say the camera doesn't help any of that either. That's, I think, where a lot of that friction comes from. It's just not capable of putting me in the right place to navigate that properly, especially when you're big. I mean, that really is I think it's a good idea, but poor execution, just based on what it is. So if you've listened to this show before, I've mentioned it in the past, but I always do these endings last. I get everything edited, the music's in, the sound effects, and then I do this piece right here last. I want to be a natural recap of what we've just listened to and learned and experienced. And my initial thought was one of panic, because I don't think I talked about this game enough. I mean, there is so much left on the table, so much more to discuss. I mean, we're talking like ghost houses and how to fight Bowser, the 13 other worlds. I think we talked about 2. There's more out there. Secrets, getting 120 stars, speedrunning. It's a big deal in the speedrunning community. I actually reached out to a bunch of speedrunners. None of them got back to me. I tried on that piece at least, and the list goes on and on and on. There's lots left unsaid. But as I'm talking this through and kind of thinking through this last piece, maybe not. I mean, do we really need more podcast time on how cool it is to swing Bowser in a circle and throw him into a bomb? Do I need to talk about red coins and level design and textures and graphics and camera angles? Like, do we need all that? Is that necessary for a Mario 64 episode? And I don't think so. That's never been the point of this show. What I hope this episode captured is what the game meant to you, the person listening to this podcast. What it meant to you when you first played it, the excitement, the wonder, the childlike joy of popping this game into your N64 and experiencing something brand new. I hope this show gave you a little bit of that, maybe a taste of that magic, nostalgic elixir that we don't get to taste a lot of as adults. We don't get to taste that. That is the stuff of children. And if so, if this episode brought you some of those feels, then it's a win. I'll take it as a win. Maybe not 120 stars, but a win nonetheless. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. In 2 weeks, we continue our journey into the N64 and discuss the game that was great to play back in the day, is near impossible these days, but still holds a lot of importance in the N64 library, GoldenEye 64. It's going to be a great episode. Be sure to check it out. And in the meantime, if you haven't already, check me out on Twitter at agamerlooks4040. In my profile, there's a link tree. Click that. It gives you all the places and all the things I can be found on. Instagram, I can be found on all the pod-catching softwares. Patreon, you name it, it's there. Check it out at your leisure if you feel so inclined. And while you're at it, leave a rating and a review on your podcast player of choice. They're super helpful in keeping the show in the eyes of the algorithm robots. And we all know to keep those robots happy and strong. Thanks once again for checking out the show. And until next time, continue being awesome.